Travel and Things, in association with Rugged Wear, Real People, Real Clothing, Real Solutions, presents In Conversation With. I am your host, David Batsoffen, and my guest today and author of a brand new book, Willie Labuschagne, The Soul of a Lion, Reflections of a Life Lived with Animals. The book is published by, I was going to say, I've forgotten Tracey's surname. Tracey MacDonald Publishers. She's going to shoot me. Willie, good morning. Welcome to you.
Good morning, David. Nice to talk to you.
It has been a while. You know, I didn't put the name together with the book until I read the blurb. And then I realized that you and I go back probably 30 years, if not more, to when you were the curator of the Johannesburg Zoo before you moved to the National Zoo in Pretoria. And I'm really glad because the book is awesome. It really and truly is, and it nails the emotions so well. For a first book, this is stunning, Billy. It really and truly is. Well done, and well done to Tracey for backing you on this.
Thank you, David. Yeah, it's a life history, and yeah, I was thrilled to again make contact with you after so many wonderful times that we had together. Well, about 40 years ago. And yeah, this has been an ambition of mine to do it. I've been nagged by many people who shared my stories with me. And it took me, except for about 30, 40 years of my life, when I started putting pen to paper or finger to computer, it took me about 3.5 years to complete. And I'm happy that people seem to enjoy my stories. You know? And these are all true happenings, as you probably will understand and remember. These are all things that really happened to me.
Well, this is it. And being the curator of a zoo, I suppose you could have gone that route and just spoken about your zoo days, because there must be more than enough stories. People dropping cameras into exhibits, people trying to climb into exhibits. Had you already left when that guy shot the gorilla? Max.
Yeah, you're quite right. In fact, David, this was when I started writing it. I didn't know where it will end.
Yeah.
And once I started talking to publishers, they told me your maximum is 90,000 words. And when I realized that I'm already there, and I then decided it's going to be 2 books. So I'm actually busy with book number 2 now, which actually does cover many of the things that people don't realize what goes on in a zoo. The life of a zoo director is such a thrilling and exciting life, not only dealing with animals, but with people as well.
Yeah.
And my chapter in the second book is the humor in the zoo. So I pick up some of the things that I've just found so humorous and day-to-day management of the zoo. So yeah, it's been a life history. And of course, also the second one deals far more with my international relations and visiting countries like Cuba just after the peace accord, and Russia and Poland, the problems in walking across the Berlin gate or the door wall. So yeah, I think in retrospect, I had generally a very exciting life, not only dealing with animals, but all other circumstances. It was a life's journey.
You credit your dad, Oom Lappies, as being your mentor.
Absolutely.
Do you believe that if he'd been something other than what he was, as far as conservation goes, that your life journey would have been totally different?
I think so. Absolutely. He was such a fantastic person, really, David. As I've mentioned, that I was 6 years old when I would join him in his classroom when he was teaching at the high school, agriculture and biology, and it made an impression on me at that age. And he just guided me. He never forced himself down on me, never, ever. But he subtly introduced me to nature conservation. And to me, that was the only thing you do. When you finish school, that's it. That's what the life is. And I'm glad because I probably would have been any direction, but I don't think that any other occupation could have offered me such a spectrum of variety of interesting things. I really, it's when you get up in the morning, you never know what the day is going to be
Yes.
with you. And that was really, and working with the animals.
Yeah.
The zoo is a wonderful place because it's so close, but so near, but so far still away. So in a zoo, you can actually, and let me interrupt myself, my own experience with many animal people, if I may call them that, I am an animal man, is that they prefer not to have people there.
Yeah.
They'd be the happiest if they can be just with their animal and no other human being. And to me, it was the opposite. I love people. And to me, it was a great challenge and an opportunity to bring these two groups together and to experience the interaction, which is goes back to time immemorial, the relationship between man and animal. And a very well-known deep sea diver, I've forgotten his name now, he made a very interesting remark once. He said that man will never truly understand his role on Earth until he can talk to the animals and understand animals.
Yeah.
And that's why I decided on the topic, the soul of a lion. Now, I know it's a controversial topic. Can you say that the animal has a soul? But to me, that interaction between man and animal is so deep-rooted and inexplainable that we still have to go a long, long way to truly understand animals. And this is what I tried to bring across in my book without trying to give an explanation of what a soul is. I'm trying to say that there are things in an animal, and like Lawrence Anthony also said, we should understand that there are many things that we will never understand.
We will never understand. What is it with the Kalahari lions, though? That's the one area of Southern Africa that is still on a list of mine that I keep putting off, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because I don't want to live in the back of my car. But the lions in Kalahari seem to be very special.
I think they are. Other than there's been a suggestion that they're bigger, but that's not really true. They are of average weight and dimension. But what is special about them is the black mane, which is very special to the Kalahari. I enjoyed the Kalahari lions simply because that's where I really had my close encounters. The very first one was really with my father when I was about 10 years old. And, those days, nobody actually knew about the Kalahari as it was then known. To them, the Kalahari was a way to get to Southwest Africa. And the only tourists were basically those that would drive past it. So the Kalahari of those days was very different to what we experience today. I mean, you've got to book about 6 months in advance. It's not only the lines, but the whole atmosphere of the Kalahari is so absolutely intriguing. And the Kalahari, it's not a true desert according to the real definition, but it is still the 5th largest desert in the world. And that environment, to me, you don't have to see animals to go to the Kalahari. Just that environment. Absolutely, David. I can certainly. And today, as I mentioned, it is so popular. You have to book in advance.
Months. I love. There's a quote in your book, and I thought I'd bookmarked it, but I haven't. It was somewhere that there was a sign about trespassers being shot, and the follow-up line was "Survivors will be shot again," which I thought was very funny.
That was in the Sperrgebied.
Sperrgebied, that's right.
That was true. Sperrgebied, that's where they mined the alluvial diamonds. And I just come back to, I had such wonderful experiences of being on that barge, which was shared among others by Demetrius Zafendas. The guy that killed Hendrik Verwoerd. So this was a caliber of people that were there. And I was a 21-year-old young guy and venturing into those things. And then, of course, later on Etosha, and then Gorongosa. It was just a life full of experiences. I really enjoyed it.
Willie, you've already said that this is book 1 of 2. So looking at the book in its final state now, is there anything that you've left out of book 1 that you went, oh darn, if only I'd added it into this, because I can't really fit it in unless it's an addendum in book 2 type of thing?
Yes, you're quite right. And you know, the thing that I'm toying with to bring it back in book 2 is, and I want to say it without boring people, but we are destroying the planet. The sooner we realize that this is happening, the better we can start doing things about it.
Yeah, we always.
When I was still a student at University Pretoria, at the end of the year, all the research people had to submit their report. So it was a conglomeration of young, dynamic guys who's going to save the world. And there was an old man of about 40 years old at that time. He kept on putting his hand up, and he said, there's only one way to solve this problem, and that is to curb the human population. And we sort of shut him down, you know. Look, old man, you had your chance, give it now to us. And he regularly put up his hand. He said, world population. And really, if you look at what he said 30, 40 years ago, and the exponential growth, we can enjoy animals. We can enjoy the environment around us, especially in South Africa. But if we don't take a global view of what goes on in the rest of the world in terms of increase and the exponential increase in human population, you know, David, these figures are known to most people, but at the moment we're running into close to 8 billion people, and the world population has a carrying capacity of 10 billion. We're going to reach that within a few decades. So what do we do then? So, yeah, and I don't want to bring a negative thing into my book. I'm very careful. I want to bring a positive, and I want to try and give a solution to that. But there are a few things that I couldn't include in book 1, which I'm certainly going to do in book 2. Yeah.
Or maybe even book 3, Willie.
You know, somebody said to me, this is going to be book 3, because part of book 2 was going to be my time in the United Arab Emirates, which is where I worked for 9 years. And that, to me, was absolutely the critical part of closing my professional career in an environment that I love, the desert. And a complete new environment. And to work with the animals, they're all new to me. So somebody said to me the other day, this is going to be your book 3.
You've got a whole new career. Little did you know when you started out at Joburg all those years. Just talking about zoos, because there are people, like anything, there are naysayers who say zoos are not good for the animals. We shouldn't keep them. We shouldn't even keep fish in an aquarium, let alone birds in cages in our houses. But if it wasn't for places like in your day, the Joburg Zoo and the National Zoo in Pretoria, which both seem to have fallen into some sort of state of disrepair, unfortunately, there are certain species that may not be around any longer. Breeding programs kept them alive and fed them back into the wild.
Yeah, you're quite right, David. And I understand people's resistance towards bad zoos. And I have often said that if there is a protest march going on to close down bad zoos, I'll be right in front.
Right.
It's not really possible to judge how many zoos are there around the world, but figures like 10,000 and have been mentioned. And yeah, I think that the majority of those should be closed down. There's no right for them and justification. But as you rightfully also indicated, that many species and will continue to rely on zoos for their future protection. And I can go through a list of animals, which is not the point of making this statement. There are good zoos and there are bad zoos. But the good zoos, I read articles yesterday about millions of dollars that especially America and even Prague Zoo. I've been to Prague Zoo many times. And I've been there during the bad times, but I've seen it during the good times. Millions of dollars are spent on creating habitats, which is so natural, almost simulating their natural habitat. And so the purpose of a zoo has certainly shifted from showing a lion in a concrete and bar enclosure cage to showing a habitat, because It is the habitat that we're concerned about.
Yeah.
So you need to create a habitat. And by doing that, you are absolutely in a wonder world. And there are incredible zoos, other than saving species from extinction, that the current zoo visitors runs into more than 700 million. About 10% of the world population visit a zoo once a year. And to many of those people, that's the only place how they can be accompanied, adjusted to animal life.
Because I mean, things like in the early days, when I came up to Johannesburg as a 6-year-old, some 63 years ago, I remember they used to do elephant rides at the zoo from the old elephant house. Now that's gone. The cages that you alluded to for the lions, those have gone. The poor polar bears that marched back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in that dark, dank enclosure of theirs, that's all gone. So I should imagine that zoos, and I know that you now run a consultancy for zoos. These are things that are taken into account now, because people don't want to see them in cages anymore. They don't want bars in their photographs. They want to be able to see the animals in as natural a surrounding as possible.
You're right. And there's a new science that was introduced to zoo management probably about 10 years ago or so, and that's environmental enrichment. Not only are you creating a habitat that simulates the natural environment, but you are creating opportunities for the animal to display natural behavior. In fact, at the National Zoo, we had a person dedicated for that environmental enrichment. So it makes it far more entertaining for both the animal as well as the public. And animals like to perform, believe it or not. They enjoy people. I've read many stories during the COVID time when zoos all over the world were closed. And all of a sudden, animals, except for the workers, didn't see the visitors anymore. And they seemed to enjoy it when the visitors kept on returning. So it's a blend between animal behavior and people's behavior. So it is, to me, it was just absolutely. And you asked the question whether I would have gone into a different profession. I am happy and satisfied that the profession I selected has been so rewarding to me. Again, working with animals and working with people, it's just been absolutely a marvelous journey.
Why did you pick cheetah as your sort of animal du jour? Because there are lots of cheetah images in this book. Lots.
It's David. At that time, there was no research done on cheetah previously. The only guy that did some research was Ronald L. Eaton, when he did a survey on cheetahs in Nairobi National Park. So we had our knowledge about cheetahs is that they're the fastest animal on land, and they don't breed in captivity. And that's basically all we knew about cheetahs. And a lot of information was actually incorrect about cheetahs. And secondly, I was in my honors here when Coca-Cola, of all places, decided to give me a bursary to study. They specifically, and my father, selected the cheetah as it was not known. And what I found in the Kalahari, the research, is that they, even in the Kalahari, their behavior differed very much to what was known in places like Serengeti. They different, absolutely different in many ways. I could, what I say, prove the information that I had was very, very different to the type of behavior that the cheetahs behave in other places, such as, for instance, their nocturnal and diurnal activity. In the Kalahari, they are forced because of the temperatures to be active in the night. And then they prey on things like spring hare. So, and the distances they walk, it was just absolutely remarkable how they adjusted to a harsh environment such as the Kalahari. So, and the cheetah has been a mystical animal, an enigmatic animal. You know, it's been with royalty since time immemorial. People have since thousands of years related themselves to cheetahs. And the hunting trips that I've also explained in my book. So this was actually the first proper study on cheetahs and the way which I did it. I don't know how, in what detail you read the book, but when eventually I decided to use spoor interpretation
Yeah, I saw
as
that.
my way of doing it, Fritz
Yeah.
Eloff, who was the doyen of research, he said, Lappies, that was my nickname, this is nonsense. How can you base a scientific evidence on interpreting tracks, spoor? I said, that's the only way I can do it.
Yeah.
There's no other way. And it worked so successful that even he himself later applied that method. So it was just an incredible journey. And of course, the other thing is the cheetahs, when you follow them every day, after a few days, they habituated on you, and you could park next to them. And as I said, I stalked them. It was a bit of a game that we played.
I see, because the cheetah are doing that in Serengeti at the moment. Since Mad Mike and Mark went up there and have invited them into their vehicles, I see people are sort of sitting there waiting for the cheetah to climb on their vehicles. And I don't know if that's a good, bad, or indifferent thing. And not something I think that is for this discussion. The book, Soul of a Lion, is designed for whom, Willie? Who do you want to read this? Who do you want the demographic to be for this book? And what do you want your readers to get out of it?
It's a good question, David, and I'm going to answer it in a way which people have responded to that. And one of the biggest responses that I had, best responses, was from the previous chairman of Naspers, Ton Vosloo, who said this book is a must for any person interested in conservation. And in fact, my friend who did the foreword said, this is a book that covers all ages. And I try to write the story in such a way that even if it's not for a young child, that the parent could take the stories and interpret those to their child, tell them the stories about what I experienced. So I think that, and the responses I've had so far, that people are happy with the book. But it's a book about nature. And this is the one thing I have learned in my life. This is a topic that you don't need to sell to people.
No.
They all love nature. And they love nature.
The interesting thing is you mentioned conservation, and I think you're doing yourself an injustice, because the book is more than about conservation, because people hear conservation and they're already backing off. The stories in here are such fun, both, they tug at your heartstrings or they make you laugh out loud. There's no middle ground in this book. And I think that's what's so wonderful, because people can identify it, with it. You finding, for instance, somebody sleeping in the lion enclosure at the Joburg Zoo, and being untouched. He was
absolutely.
And as you point out in the book, he was from a mental institution and he just climbed into the cage. I also love the fact that you had to change the uniforms. I don't want to go into too much depth as to who you compared them to, but to have to wear a tie, a beret, and I mean,
polished shoes.
It's laughable. It really and truly is. I think back to an uncle of mine who was the medical officer of health in Pretoria, and in those days, the medical officers who went into the townships had to wear barathea blazers, ties, and all the usual. And he was the first one that said, no, let them wear safari suits. It's too hot to wear a barathea blazer.
Absolutely.
In Pretoria in the middle of summer. And I should imagine it's the same in a zoo. You don't want to be in a tie that a lion can grab hold of. You want loose-fitting clothes that will tear off easily.
David, when I joined the National Zoo, they even had a uniform dress code for weekends, which was far more formal. Weekends, it's a different uniform. But you're right. The book is not only about conservation in the true sense, and I've been very careful. This should not be a scientific journal. It shouldn't be. It should be a human interest story. But I thought that you were going to refer to the dilemma I had, and eventually had to teach my bushmen how to drive a Land Rover. I mean, that
your Landy comes in for a lot of stick. Isaac came in for a lot of stick in this book, climbing over the top of dunes and finding a shepherd's bush in the middle of its descent.
And I'm sitting on the bonnet.
And you're sitting on the bonnet.
Yeah.
So are you still a Land Rover person, or have you changed to Toyota?
I've changed, but not to Toyota. But no, that was and I don't know anything about a motor car, as I made clear on a number of occasions. I had absolutely no interest in. My father was not a mechanic or mechanically, and I was never taught how to change a carburetor. I wouldn't even know where the hell it is. So no, I believe that that when you get into the car, just ignite and go. Don't fiddle around.
And if it doesn't, then you pay somebody to fix it, basically.
Absolutely, that's quite right. I belong to a club here that they come out and help me. But yeah,
and they go, it's Willie again, bloody Land Rover.
I tried to, in the book, have a balance between the humor side of it and also the serious thing. The death of my father was something terrible that I experienced, and the things that just happened in my favor to get the Landy going again. But also the times that I was actually close to death by that lines, which I often think back to, and I could have been gone. It's so easy. So
people don't realize that those things are wild creatures and they can eat you in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
And it's not because they dislike you. It's just because you're at the wrong place in the wrong time.
You're an intruder. Yeah. And in my next book, I refer to where I went into the Goosibiaga National Park and in track of gorillas and being stormed by a gorilla until about 2-3 meters from me. And the wardens grabbed me to prevent me from running away. So, yeah, to encounter all those things is just exciting.
Willie, we're almost out of time. The book is called The Soul of a Lion, Reflections on a Life Lived with Animals. It's by Willie Labuschagne. It's published by Tracey MacDonald Publishers. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. It's come out at exactly the right time. Willie, thank you so very much for chatting to me again. It's been an absolute pleasure. I can't wait for book 2 and book 3.
Thank you very much, David. It's nice talking to you again.
My guest today here on In Conversation with Willie Labuschagne. The book, once again, The Soul of the Lion.